400 motorcycles lining both sides of Sycamore Street in Granger, Missouri had never happened before. Not for a parade, not for a rally, not for anything. The town had a population of 6,000 and a main street that ran 8 blocks and a Baptist church on the corner of Sycamore and Fifth that had stood since 1924. And in all of those years and all of those blocks and all of those Sunday mornings, nothing had ever come down Sycamore Street the way 400 Hells Angels came down it on a Thursday in October, in formation, in silence, engines off, walking their bikes to the curb the way pallbearers walk, with the deliberate care of men who understand they are part of something that requires them to be more than they usually are. They were there for a woman named Dottie Vane, 81 years old, 19 years a widow, 43 years a regular at the Granger Diner on the corner of 5th and Main, where she had taken the same window booth every Tuesday and Thursday morning and ordered the same cup of coffee and the same slice of wheat toast, and had in those 43 years become such a fixture of the diner's daily life that when the staff had a bad morning, they waited for Dottie's arrival because it made the morning better. Not one of the 400 men walking their motorcycles down Sycamore Street had known her name a year ago. It started the way it always starts, with a single person and a single moment, and a choice that did not feel large when it was made. The Granger Diner sat on the corner of 5th and Main, the way corner diners are supposed to, sit like it had grown there, like the concrete and the street had simply arranged themselves around it over time, until the diner became as fixed a feature of the corner as the stoplight. It had been there since 1961. The original counter stools were still there, reupholstered twice in 63 years. The coffee machine was a 2009 replacement for the 2001 replacement for the original, each new machine acquiring the same particular burned smell of the one before it within its first month of operation, which the staff took as a sign of character. The walls held 3 generations of photographs: the diner at its opening, the diner in the 70s when the sign was different, the diner in a snowstorm that had made the local paper, birthday cards pinned above the register from regulars who had been coming since before the staff were born, a drawing that a child had made and left and which had never been taken down. It was a place that held people without making a formal offer of it. People came, and they came again, and eventually they were simply part of the place in the way that things become part of a place without anyone deciding it. Dottie Vane had been part of it since 1981. Max Stoker had been coming through Granger on his way between St. Louis and the Chapter House in Joplin for 11 years, and he stopped at the Granger Diner every time because the coffee was what it was, and because there was always parking on 5th for the Road King, and because somewhere in the sequence of trips, the diner had become a fixed point in a route that had very few of them. He was 58 years old, a large man, not in the exaggerated way of men who work at being large, but in the way of men who have been doing physical things for decades and whose bodies have simply recorded it. His beard was full and going silver at the chin. His cut bore the St. Louis chapter, sergeant-at-arms for 12 years, not president, not road captain, the specific rank of a man who is responsible for what happens in a room when something starts happening, the rank that exists because some situations require someone who has already made the decision and simply needs the occasion. When Max Stoker walked into the Granger Diner, the room did not stop, it adjusted. Tables toward the back tended to become interesting to the people sitting at them. The conversation near the door tended to lower a register. He sat at the counter, as he always did. He knew the counter staff by first name. They knew his order. The relationship was efficient and warm in the way of people who see each other regularly and have decided that the regularity itself is the relationship, which the kind of relationship that holds up. He had been riding since early on a Tuesday, coming from St. Louis after a chapter matter that had taken most of the previous week and had left him quieter than usual in the way that certain kinds of chapter business leave a person not troubled exactly, but reminded of the cost of things, which is its own kind of quiet. He was heading to Joplin for 3 days. He wanted the coffee and the counter, and 20 minutes where nothing was required of him. He had been sitting for 4 minutes when he noticed the woman in the window booth. To everyone watching who has ever been told that the wrong person was dangerous, this one's for you. Hit subscribe before we go further and drop your city and state in the comments below. I read every single one. I want to know how far this story travels now. Back to the Granger Diner. because the woman in that window booth was going to teach a man named Max Stoker something about loyalty that he would carry for the rest of his life. And it started with something small. It always starts small. Dorothy Louise Vane, Dottie, 80 years old on the Tuesday that Mac first noticed her, which meant she had one birthday remaining. She would turn 81 in December and would not see January, though no one knew that yet, least of all Dottie, who was not in the business of anticipating endings and never had been. She had lived in Granger her whole life, born there, schooled there, married there in 1964 to a man named Harold Vane, who had worked at the grain elevator for 31 years and had died in the spring of 2005, and whose absence she had organized her life around in the way of women who have been married long enough that the marriage becomes the architecture of everything. You do not rebuild after the loss. You find the load-bearing walls and you hold them. She was 4'11" and had been since she was 17 and had never found this inconvenient. She wore a good coat to the diner, regardless of the season, a dark wool coat with covered buttons that she had owned for 9 years, and that still looked like a good coat because she treated it as one. She kept her white hair set in the way it had been set since 1979, which was a decision she had made and seen no reason to revisit. She ordered coffee, black, and wheat toast with butter, and she ate the toast with the specific, unhurried attention of a person who has earned the right to eat without rushing. She had been a school teacher, 4th grade, Granger Elementary, for 37 years. This meant that a significant portion of Granger's adults had sat in her classroom at some point and carried something from it, a method for long division, a poem memorized and never quite forgotten, the particular way she had of waiting after she asked a question, a silence that communicated she believed the answer was there, and the child merely needed a moment to find it. She still sent birthday cards. This was the specific dignified thing about Dottie Vane. She kept a small address book in her purse, updated in pencil so the corrections could be made, and she sent birthday cards to everyone in it. Former students, neighbors, the woman who cut her hair, the girl at the pharmacy who always found her prescription quickly. She wrote them by hand, in the cursive that had been standard when she learned it, and had become rare enough since that the people who received them sometimes held onto them. The address book was in her purse on the Tuesday that Max Stoker noticed her. She was not in her usual window booth. She was in it, technically the same booth, the same position, but she was not in it the way she was usually in it. Usually Dottie arrived, shed her coat, arranged it on the hook beside the booth, opened the address book to wherever she had stopped, and spent the duration of her coffee composing or finishing a card from a small stack she kept in the front pocket. The waitress, a woman named Bev, who had been at the Granger diner for 22 years, and who knew Dottie the way you know a fixed point, once said that watching Dottie at her booth was like watching someone at prayer, complete, absorbed, not available to interruption in a way that was nonetheless not unfriendly. Today the address book was closed. The coffee was in front of her, but she had not drunk from it. Her hands were in her lap, and she was looking at the table. Mac watched this from the counter. Not intrusively, he was not a man who stared. But he noticed things. It was the sergeant-at-arms in him. Rooms told you what was happening if you knew how to read them. And this room was telling him that the woman in the window booth was not herself today, and that whatever had made her not herself had arrived before she did and had followed her in. He went back to his coffee. Then the door opened. The cold came in first. October cold Missouri variety, thin and insistent, the kind that finds the gaps. Then the man. He was 63 years old, and he was the kind of man who enters a room the way a weather system enters, rearranging things by his presence before he has done anything specific. His name was Leonard Vane, Dottie's son, her only living child. He had been in Granger for the past 3 weeks, which was 2.5 weeks longer than he usually stayed when he came, and the length of the visit had a purpose that was not yet fully visible to the people watching it from outside. He was not a large man physically. He was medium in every dimension, medium height, medium build, a face that was average in the way of faces that have never had to develop into anything more arresting because the person wearing them had other methods of making themselves felt. He wore a fleece jacket and clean jeans and a wedding ring he had worn for 31 years. He looked like someone's son-in-law, which was a thing he had perfected. He saw Dottie in the booth and walked toward her, and the walk was wrong. Not fast, not aggressive. He was never fast or aggressive in public. This was important to understand about Leonard Vane. but purposeful in a way that had a target and a private intention behind it. And the combination of those things registered in the room the way a low-pressure system registers on a barometer before the weather changes. He sat down across from her. He did not greet her. He put his phone on the table between them, face up, and he looked at her in the way of a man who has been building to a conversation and has now arrived at it. "I've been to the bank," he said. Dottie looked at the phone. She did not look at him. "The account," he said. His voice was quiet, reasonable. The voice of a man in a diner who did not want to be heard, and who had the experience to know that a voice that carries is a voice that loses. "You need to add my name. I've been telling you this." "I'll think about it," Dottie said. "You've been thinking about it for 3 weeks. Then I'll think about it for 1 more. Leonard leaned forward. Not much, an inch, too. The lean of a man who was reducing the distance between himself and a point he wanted to make. "Mom," he said. "Dad's accounts, the house. You can't manage this alone. We've been over this." "I've been managing alone for 19 years, she said. "That was different." "How?" He paused. He picked up the phone. He turned it toward her. "The account balance, Mom. You need to look at this." "I've looked at it." "Have you?" "Because the way you've been—" Max set his coffee mug down. He did it the way a period ends a sentence. The sound was small. It was enough. Nobody in that diner saw it coming. Bev, the waitress, had her back turned. The couple in the booth by the register were not looking. The 2 men at the counter had found other things to be interested in. Because the thing happening in the window booth was the kind of thing that asks a room to pretend it is not happening, and rooms are good at that when they are afraid. Leonard Vane heard the mug. He looked at the counter. Max Stoker was looking at him, not with hostility, not with anything theatrical, with the specific, undirected, patient attention of a man who has decided to watch something and does not care whether being watched is comfortable for the person being watched. Leonard looked back at his mother. "We'll talk later," he said low. "You'll talk when she wants to talk," Max said. Leonard turned. Fully, this time. "This doesn't concern you," Leonard said. "She's not comfortable." Max said. "That concerns me. I'm her son. I can see that." Leonard held the look for 3 seconds. He was accustomed to looks resolving in his favor. This one did not resolve. It simply continued. Max Stoker did not look away, did not adjust his expression, did not offer Leonard anything to respond to. He just looked, the way a man looks when he has all the time available to him. Leonard stood. He was practiced at exits. He left in the way of a man who has decided to leave on his own terms, which meant unhurried, tucking the phone in his pocket, straightening his jacket, not looking at Mac again, because looking at Mac again would have meant acknowledging that the exchange had occurred. He left. The diner went so quiet that the only sound was the coffee machine. Mac picked up his mug. He turned back to the counter. He drank his coffee. Bev appeared beside him from the pass-through and refilled his cup without asking, which was what Bev did when she was grateful. 2 minutes passed. Then Dottie slid out of the window booth, put her coat on, and walked to the stool beside Max. She sat. She set the address book on the counter in front of her. She opened it to where she had left off. She did not look at him directly. She looked at the address book. "I grew dahlias," she said, "before my knees." Mac looked at the address book. "Harold used to say I talked to them," she said. "I told him they talked back." "Maybe they did." She was quiet for a moment. "He's been here 3 weeks," she said. It was not an explanation. It was a fact she had decided he was owed. "Is he staying?" "He wants the house," she said. "He wants the accounts. He's been wanting them since Harold died, and he thinks I don't know that." She paused. "I've been a school teacher for 37 years. I know when someone thinks they're being subtle." Mac looked at her. "You have someone?" he said. "A lawyer? A neighbor?" "My lawyer is in Jefferson City," she said. "My neighbor is 84. She picked up a pen from the address book. She looked at the card she had been starting. "A December birthday. People look at me," she said, "and they see an old woman who needs managing." She looked at the card. "I have been not needing managing for 80 years. I am not going to start now." She wrote in the card. Cursive, deliberate, the hand of a woman who had written 10,000 of these and intended to write more. She stopped. She looked at the address book, not at him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for earlier." "Don't mention it," Max said. He left a number on the back of a receipt. He did not explain why. He pushed it toward the address book and finished his coffee and paid and went. He drove to Joplin, thinking about Harold Vane's house on Decker Street, and an address book in a coat pocket, and a woman who talked to dahlias and knew they talked back. He came through Granger the following Tuesday. She was in the window booth. The address book was open. She looked up when he sat at the counter, and she nodded in the way of someone acknowledging an appointment they had both kept without making it. He came through the Tuesday after that, and the one after that. Over 11 weeks, Max Stoker learned that Dottie Vane had taught fourth grade for 37 years and could still name every student she had ever had if given the year. He learned that Harold had proposed to her in the grain elevator where he worked because he said he wanted to ask her somewhere that meant something to him, which she had found correct and romantic in equal measure. He learned that Leonard had borrowed money from Harold twice in the 1990s and had not repaid it, and that this was something Harold had never mentioned to Dottie, but that Dottie had known, because she managed the accounts and she was a school teacher, and numbers did not lie to her. He learned about the house, that Leonard had begun the process of having her assessed for a guardianship proceeding, the legal instrument by which a court could determine that a person was no longer competent to manage their own affairs. Dottie's lawyer in Jefferson City had sent a letter. The proceeding would require a response. He called the lawyer from the Granger Diner parking lot on a Thursday in December, sitting on the Road King in the cold, and told the lawyer that he would find Dottie, the name of a specialist in elder law in Columbia, who had done this work for the chapter's community before and who would do it without charge for Dottie, because the chapter had a way of handling things like this, and Mac was going to use it. The lawyer said he appreciated the call. Mac said it was nothing. He believed this. He did not understand yet how wrong he was about that. She died in January. Quickly, as these things sometimes go, a stroke in her sleep in Harold's house on Decker Street, with the dahlia beds dormant under the first snow and the address book on the nightstand beside her where it always was. Her neighbor found her in the morning. The neighbor called Bev at the diner, because that was how information moved in Granger, not through official channels, first through the people who knew. Bev called Mac. He was in St. Louis. He sat in his kitchen and held the phone for a long time after the call ended. She had signed the documents for the elder law attorney in December. The guardianship proceeding had been dismissed. The house was hers to dispose of as she chose, which she had chosen, in a will updated in November, to leave to a literacy program at Granger Elementary, where she had spent 37 years believing that children had the answers and simply needed a moment to find them. Leonard was named in the will. The amount was the total of what Harold had lent him in the 1990s, adjusted for 30 years of interest to the dollar. Mac made one call, then another. Then the word went the way the word goes, engines. The sound of 400 of them idling down Sycamore Street was something that no one in Granger had a category for and would not forget as long as they lived. The people who came out of their houses to look, and they all came out, stood on their porches and watched without speaking because there was nothing to say that would have been adequate. 400 men, walking their bikes to the curb, in silence. They lined both sides of Sycamore Street from the corner of Fifth all the way to the church. They stood at their motorcycles in the gray January cold, and they did not move and they did not speak. The only sound was the wind moving through the bare trees and the distant sound of the bells at the Baptist church on the corner, doing what Baptist church bells do at the hour of a funeral. Inside the church, the service was small. Dottie had not left instructions about the funeral, because Dottie was the kind of woman who made provisions for everyone else and trusted that the world would make provisions for her. The provisions turned out to be Bev and 6 former students, and the woman who cut Dottie's hair, and the librarian and the pharmacist girl who had always found the prescription quickly, and 400 men in cuts standing at attention on Sycamore Street in January. Max stood at the front, not inside outside, at the foot of the church steps, facing the street, facing the 400. He was not president. He was sergeant at arms. He was the man responsible for what happens when something starts happening. Nothing was starting. He stood there anyway. When the doors opened and the casket came through, carried by former students who were now men in their 40s and 50s, men who remembered a specific silence at the end of a question and what it had meant to trust them to find the answer. 400 men removed their helmets. Not one of them had been asked to. It simply happened, the way things happen when a room understands something simultaneously. The street went silent. Not the absence of sound, the other kind, the kind that has weight. Bev stood at the top of the steps. She had known Dottie for 22 years. She had refilled her coffee 2 mornings a week for 22 years, which was a form of knowing that accumulated into something that did not have a name, but that she felt the full measure of standing on those steps in January. She looked at the street, at the 400, at Mac at the foot of the steps. She had told Dottie once 6 months ago about the man who came through on Tuesdays. She had told her that people in town were talking, the way towns talk, that Dottie Vane was spending her Tuesday mornings at the counter with a Hell's Angel, and didn't that seem like something to worry about? Dottie had looked at her from the window booth. "I taught fourth grade for 37 years, she said. "I know a good person when I sit next to one." Mac rode out of Granger at 4 in the afternoon, when the last engine had started and the last motorcycle had eased away from the curb and Sycamore Street had returned to itself. He took Route 60 west toward Joplin, which was the direction he had been going the first time he pulled into the Granger diner 11 years ago, and the direction he went every time, and the direction the road expected of him. The January air was cold and flat, and the bare fields on both sides of the highway stretched out to the tree lines without interruption. He rode without rushing. He thought about an address book kept in pencil so the corrections could be made. He thought about dahlias in a dormant garden under January snow, holding what they were until the ground let them be it again. He thought about a woman who had been managing without being managed for 80 years, and who had done it with cursive birthday cards and wheat toast and butter and the particular patience of someone who trusted that the answer was there, and the world merely needed a moment to find it. He thought about the receipt he had pushed toward her address book, the number on the back. She had kept it. He knew because her lawyer told him. It was in the address book when they found her, filed between the V entries and the W entries in pencil. Mac, Tuesday, that was all. Everyone in Granger warned her. They said it gently, the way people say things they believe for your own good, that men like that a Hell's Angel, that you didn't know what you were inviting. They meant well, they said it with love. Dottie listened to them, the way she listened to everything, completely and without interruption. And then she went to the diner on Tuesday morning, and she sat at the counter, and she opened the address book. She knew a good person when she sat next to one. She was right. She was a school teacher. She had been right about people for 37 years. She did not stop being right because she was 80 years old, and the person she was right about wore a cut instead of a classroom. 400 people came to stand on Sycamore Street in January for a woman most of them had never met, because one man had made 11 Tuesday stops at a diner instead of 9, and because Dottie Vane had taught fourth grade long enough to know that the answer was already there in the person across from her, and all she had to do was wait for it to come. She waited. It came. If this story stayed with you, share it. Send it to someone who needs to remember that character cannot be read from the outside. Subscribe so you're here for the next one, and drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from tonight. Type Dottie in the comments if this one broke something open in you.